right? Um, yeah, we got the final part of Elvis. That was final and Elvis mixed together. Finest. Um, yeah, the final part of Elvis when he met Nixon, which has been a fascinating story so far. It's like actually truly fascinating. And if you haven't seen the first two parts, I suggest you go and check them out because they are yeah, it's an amazing story. Just put it that way. But anyway, let's go.
Well, after lunch, I called John Finlater over at the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. And this decision to give the badge was not my finest hour. I just want you to know, I just said, yes, I went along with it. I should have thought it through. But I said, John, the president has decided that he would like to give an authentic badge to Elvis Presley. And John Finlater's response was, well, I guess it's not so bad to be overruled by the president. He had given the correct answer before.
Right,
and
right.
And so he brought a badge over after lunch.
And that's why we had lunch, because Elvis was not going to leave.
To leave without it.
Yeah.
That's right. Got that right.
Could we see that badge, please?
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the badge. There it is.
There's the badge. Yeah. It's a beautiful badge.
It's the real
I wish
thing.
I had one. It's,
Yeah.
So he brought that badge over, and you did leave with that. Now, when I said it was secret not just for a week. It was a secret for 13 months.
Is that amazing?
Now, here's the way Washington works. Some people will write memoirs, and somehow those memoirs, those drafts, might get into the possession of an investigative reporter. Jack Anderson was a very popular, how many remember Jack Anderson? Oh, you all do, merry-go-round. Merry-go-round, you turn to that first. And there was a story that came out on January 25th, 1972, and I will get, you can't see this, I don't think we have a slide. Presley gets Narcotics Bureau badge. Now, this is not exactly a hot news story. This happened a year and a month earlier. But Finlater's memoirs had gotten to Jack Anderson. And it was like, he got a narcotics badge? What's this all about? And
I wondered how he got it.
That's how he got it, from
amazing.
John Finlater. And then John Finlater's memoirs, he describes the first meeting that he had with Elvis. And then my call later on. John and I were good friends, and I felt badly about really making the call, but not so bad.
No.
Not so bad right now.
Jerry, could you tell us, you got a bit of a tour of the White House. What did Elvis say when he saw the Situation Room?
Well, you know, Elvis was a huge film buff, and there was a film called Dr. Strangelove, and which we saw, I guess, 15 times at our private screenings, and Elvis could play every part. He could play Peter Sellers choking himself. He could do George C. Scott, well, Mr. President, and all that stuff. He was a great actor, actually. And so there's a part in there where they go in the situation room, and Peter Sellers says, "You can't fight in the war room." So we go in the Situation Room, and Elvis says, "You can't fight in the war room."
Yeah, that's right.
He had a great sense of humor, too.
He did.
I think we can see an image of the Jack Anderson
There it is.
article.
Oh, is it not?
Let's maybe we'll.
I'm looking at it, but I'm not sure.
We're looking at it. Oh, it is.
Presley gets Narcotics Bureau
We have
badge.
everything at the National Archives.
You guys are amazing. Where did you get that? That's amazing stuff. So and you know, when you have a meeting like this occur, I thought, all right, it's a great meeting. It's the rest. It's secret. I didn't say anything to anybody. Now imagine this: the King of Rock comes to the White House in the morning, and we weren't secreting him through tunnels or anything like that. No. I mean, we were moving him through the Roosevelt Room into the Oval Office. Afterwards, we went down the halls, and Elvis was friendly with a lot of the employees.
He kissed a couple of the girls.
Kissed a couple of the girls.
Yeah.
So it's and they remembered that, and so it was something where to keep that confidential is almost, I mean, it's incredible. How could that happen? Top secret material floats out of that place every day, you know. But having this man come in with you and with Sonny, and have that be kept secret for 13 months was incredible. And I think that's what really piqued Jack Anderson's interest.
Did you get special bragging rights in the Nixon White House because
Absolutely.
you had met
Oh,
Elvis?
and I have just, I've milked this as much as possible.
We still are.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. 40 years later.
Of course, it's not a lie, but through the magic of video, we can now listen to President Richard Nixon remember meeting Elvis Presley. So if we could play that clip now.
Elvis was clutching some badges from various police departments and sheriff's departments around the country. Then Elvis starts showing the president his cufflinks, and the president's looking at those. Oh, those are nice cufflinks.
Well, he was very flamboyant.
President Nixon recalled the meeting in a 1990 interview.
I didn't know that much about him except what I had read. But as I talked to him, I sensed, too, that basically he's a very shy man. The flamboyance was covering up the shyness. People say that because later on it was found that he had used drugs, that therefore he could not be a good example. They overlooked the fact that he never used illegal drugs. It was always drugs prescribed by his physician. But I think that he was a very sincere and decent man.
There's an interesting...
I don't believe that for a second. I think Elvis did anything. It was the age of it. It was the age of it before there was really horror stories around. Like, well, say the 50s he came around, but then the 60s was the real like drug era. But yeah, I don't believe that. Let's go.
I'll let you.
Well, there's an interesting thing, and what the president said is true, actually. There's a difference between street drugs and prescription drugs. You can certainly abuse prescription drugs. But, my observation of this meeting, when I saw the most powerful person in the world who, personally, politically, I was on the other side at that time. And I saw him meeting the most popular person in the world. And I saw there was these two great men when you think of the world and history. Both who were had been at the top of their professions, but weren't at that moment. Elvis was, it was okay at the time, and the president wasn't that popular at the time. But my observation of seeing two great men connect on a human level, and I think they really got the loneliness of both of their positions in the world. And it wasn't just that meeting. They stayed in touch. Yeah. And I admired, first of all, if there was ever an American story, that was Elvis Presley. We grew up in North Memphis, poor section. If you ever saw a movie called Hustle and Flow, that's where Elvis and I grew up, and Sonny. And here we were in the Oval Room of the White House with the President of the United States, and they really had a human, the President got, as you did in the pre-meeting, got what Elvis's intentions were. Elvis, he in his own way understood a certain amount of the pressures of the presidency. And it was a real, there's so many funny things about that meeting, but the real thing about that meeting to me, if there was ever a true American story, I think that's one of the top.
Jared, tell a little bit of when Richard Nixon went into the hospital, what Elvis did.
Elvis called him when the president had phlebitis. And when Elvis went in the hospital, the president contacted him.
Yeah.
And there was a really mutual respect. And, it was nice to know that a person so powerful as the President of the United States was a human being.
Yeah.
I got to, witness that personally.
We of course, have a clip from President Nixon. Do you recall Elvis Presley later talking to you about the effect that this visit had on his life?
Well, what he was really proud about was that he got the badge.
Yeah. That's right. He got the badge.
That was his main, and he was very particular with this badge, though. He wasn't, we met on tours and stuff. We had a lot of security, and Elvis liked to hang out with the police officers. Some became good friends of ours, various parts of the country. And he would always, as he did to the president, Bud, he had a briefcase of real badges from different states, and he was very particular who he showed this badge to.
He carried it, didn't he?
Always. Yes.
And that's on display at Graceland right now in that long hall of awards.
Yeah.
It's up on the wall.
The wall of gold.
Elvis has got the top trumps of talking shit rights. Like if you're sitting in a pub with your mates and someone's saying, I did this and I did that, and Elvis can say, yeah, well, I wanted on a narcotics badge, and what did I say? 2 people turned him down. He's like, so then I travelled all the way across America to go and meet with the president, or try and get a meeting with the president. I got the meeting with the president, and I got the badge. I mean, who could top that? That's a hell of bragging rights. And the other thing I was thinking when he was saying about the human connection is that it's not any president Elvis got in the thing, because Nixon, if I'm right, was Republican, conservative here, but Republican, but right wing, which are normally wouldn't be open to someone like. They are really the mix of 2 extremes of one, or well, not 2 extremes, but Nixon being a Republican and Elvis being Elvis. And plus, I can imagine, like he said, politically, I can imagine that they didn't see eye to eye with him, just from being creative types. It just tends to be that way. But he said yes, and they did get on. So yeah, it's kind of, yeah. But anyway, let's go.
Yeah, wall of gold. Yeah.
Now, we'd like to open this up to questions.
Yeah.
So there are mics on the left and on the right. If you have any questions for Jerry or Bud.
And by the way, I think we have copies, I hope we have enough here, of Elvis and Nixon in the Oval Office. This is the one that David was referring to, and I think we brought a few hundred of them. Are they back there, Melanie, in the back? So if you want to pick this up on the way out, this is on a pamphlet that I wrote a few years ago. And the book that I wrote, The Day Elvis Met Nixon, 15 years ago, is going to be reprinted by the Nixon Library, and it should be out the next few months. I think
it's a great book. It is really, it has everything in it. It's a great book.
Yeah, it has very few words, which is good because I don't write that. But it's got lots of the pictures that you've seen tonight and some more that you haven't seen. So that hopefully will be out. But you might want to take this one because, as David said, this is one of the most requested.
One of the most requested photographs. Yes.
Yeah, but you sell them, right? So
we know.
Okay. Much better quality. Yeah. What can I say? These are cheapos, but you might have fun with this. It's
Start over there.
So, of course, we all hear about the White House tapes. Is there a tape of this visit, and has it been released?
No, because the taping system did not start until February of 1971.
Yeah.
Because of this event, right?
Because
no, it wasn't because of this.
Because of this event.
I would have better notes if it had been taped.
We wish there were a tape. This would be this would be the most requested White House tape.
Yeah, that's right. A set of transcripts.
In the video clip with the president, he said he only knew about Elvis what he had read, and I had heard that he really didn't know very much about him at all. Can you comment on that, Sherry?
I think Bud.
Yeah. Well, I think, he was very much in tune with, I think, Americana, what was going on. He certainly knew who Elvis Presley was. I don't know whether he followed the career completely, but he certainly understood his place in American culture, his importance. I think Haldeman understood that. I think obviously Dwight Chapin who conceived this whole thing. This would not have happened without Dwight's foresight and vision. But I think that the president was aware of it. But I don't think he played the tunes at night. He played Rachmaninoff. Love Me Tender, and a few others would have been good. But, sir?
The question for Jerry. Just wanted to know if you had any insight or details of the logistics of Elvis leaving Memphis and his first trip to Washington. As far as, you know, it's mind-boggling to think that Elvis gets on a plane in Memphis, comes to Washington. You know, if I was walking through the airport, I'd be standing there, probably still just staring and waiting for Elvis to do or say something. But as far as him arriving in Washington and checking into the hotel, did he give you any details as far as anything happening, his taxi ride, I'm just curious if you had any details on that.
There was a couple of details. One was, what I'd mentioned earlier about the flight coming back to meet me and the gun situation. But there was, to tell you what a great actor Elvis was, there was a situation where on that first trip, as the car was taking him to the hotel, he stopped at a donut shop. And, you know, Elvis, he didn't care where things were. It wasn't in a really good neighborhood, and it was predominantly a pretty rough place, as I found out later. He was just telling me he stopped at this donut shop, and he had all the jewelry on, you know, the rings and everything. And so these kind of superfly guys were going, "Hey, man, that's some really nice jewelry." And Elvis, he goes in his boot, pulls out a little snub-nosed gun and says, "Yeah, and I aim to keep it." And they all laughed. Now, how good an actor he was. There's a famous author named Peter Geraldnik, who is the best music author. He's searching for Robert Johnson and everything, and he did Last Train to Memphis. And as I did 11 years of interviews with him for these 2 books, he kept calling me back and saying, "Now, how were you at the donut shop when this happened?" Because, and I kept telling him, you know, I don't know, but, you know, and Elvis had told that story so much. This was before he came and got me. I thought I was there, you know? So I had to rescind my thought about being there.
Sir?
This question is for Jerry. Was the soldier that you guys gave the money to on the plane, was he white or black?
God, you know, we didn't really think in those terms that much, actually.
I had heard both.
You know, I don't really remember, and I don't know.
That'd be interesting to know.
Yeah.
The house that...
It wouldn't have made any difference to him.
No, it wouldn't have made any difference. The house that Elvis met you at.
Yeah, that was a bit of a
Was that a gift to you from Elvis?
No. This was his house on Hillcrest. It was worth a few $1 million. He bought me my home in 1974. I live up in the West Hollywood Hills. And for no reason, nobody knew it except the inner circle. And Elvis had known that I had lost my mother when I was like a little over a year old. And just out of the blue, he said, "You know, you never really had a home. I want to be the one to give it to you." And so I still live there. So, but that's the type of real person he was.
Thanks.
Sir?
Mr. Schilling, Mr. Crow, I'd like to thank you very much for coming to Washington to tell this story. And you talked about, in this meeting, we saw the human side of both President Nixon and Elvis Presley. And I don't mean this to be a hostile question, but more of a sympathetic one. Wasn't Richard Nixon a bit of a hypocrite to rail against drug abuse when it was alleged that early in his presidency he was taking anticonvulsant medication to relieve stress? And I believe it's been well documented that he was abusing alcohol as the Watergate scandal began to unravel.
But again, it's legal.
Well, I would have to take issue, I think, with the premise of the question. I don't think that, at least to my knowledge, that there was any history of abuse of alcohol at all. I mean, and in terms of the drugs that he used, I think they were all prescribed drugs. I did work on the narcotics programs for Richard Nixon for 4 years. And he focused very specifically on what he thought were the most dangerous drugs, heroin in particular. And he shifted the national policy from a primarily law enforcement policy to treatment, rehabilitation, research, education, because he saw that as where we could get the greatest value. And it was done, I think, because he felt that was the best policy, it would have the greatest effect, would also reduce crime. So I don't see that there was real hypocrisy. I didn't think that it was an antagonistic question. It's a good question.
Well put. Well put.
I just read in the newspaper a few days ago of a woman who was working at the White House, and apparently she claims that Elvis was having an affair with her for 3 years, and that was the reason why he came to D.C.
We'd have to ask Jack Anderson.
I guess, I have no knowledge.
I don't
about
know
that.
what happened before he came to L.A. To meet me, so I don't know what his intentions were coming here originally. I don't know, but we did have a friend in Washington that we had met in Vegas, two sisters, and that's probably where that came from, because she had worked with the government as well. So
that never got to my office.
And he never mentioned that to me, and I spent 3 days with him. I mean, he told me everything that had happened. But I don't, you know what? I don't remember him mentioning that at all.
Thank you.
Yes.
This question is for Jerry. I understand that 10 days after his White House visit, Elvis was in Washington and toured the FBI headquarters and wanted to meet with J. Edgar Hoover, who was on vacation at the time. Do you know anything about this? Did he stay in Washington the whole time? Did he fly back to Memphis and fly to Washington again?
No, after we left, he personally, in the car, dropped me off at the airport where I could get back to my job. And then he and Sonny took another commercial flight back to Memphis. I think in his excitement about the visit, and we had a good friend, Bill Morris, who was the mayor back there, and he was the one that got Elvis as one of the 10 outstanding young Americans, which Elvis mentioned to the president, who was one of those as well. Then Elvis, and I'm back in LA, but he did make another trip and brought Bill Morris and a couple of people, and he did not meet Hoover.
It was a lot harder to meet with J. Edgar Hoover than with the president. I can vouch for that. I was away on.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir.
I'm just wondering, did you get to keep your job in L.A.?
You know?
And how did the explanation go?
Great
good question. That's
great question. I did keep my job in L.A., and there was no way I was going to tell them the truth.
That's right.
They would have never believed it. They would have fired me, you know. So I just reported I meant to call. I was sick, and I worked there for another few months, and then Elvis. He liked the way I'd set up things with you and everybody, Bud, and he had told me on the way to the airport that he wanted me to come back to work for him, and if I did, then I could be an editor on his films. And I didn't answer him. And then I get in the mail business cards, Jerry Schilling, personal public relations to Elvis Presley. And I thought, you know, if he wants me to come back this bad, and I did love working for him. A few months later, I quit Paramount and went back to work for Elvis.
I don't think there are any other questions, so do you have some final thoughts?
Well, I just like to say that the story probably it doesn't have many redeeming, scholarly, literary, historical, philosophical importance. But it's pure Americana, that these two people could come together and, you know, given Dwight's vision and the fact that I was a crazy fan of Elvis, and you were terrific in talking to on the phone, and These are just a bunch of guys trying to make something happen and not knowing at the time that it was really significant. I mean, this was just, wow, look at these two people together, and then watch them, as Jerry said, relate to each other, person to person, and like each other. And in the book, you know, what we tried to do is show some of the parallels. They came from absolutely dire poverty and rose to the pinnacle in their particular professions. And what did it take to do that? I mean, the drive and the talent that Elvis had, that voice, and Nixon's drive, and there are a lot of similarities in the way that they lived. Their mansions and their gestures, you know, Elvis with the guitar and Nixon, you know, he had his, and it was just a beautiful thing to watch. And you don't want to overstate its significance, but it's really part of our country that you can have somebody like Elvis come in and meet the president, have them relate to each other in a very positive way, and be kind to each other, and then want to follow up. I love the story, as you can probably see. Yeah.
Jerry?
Well, God, you know, there's so many thoughts that go on my mind. I guess to sum it up, to be able to have a friend like Elvis Presley, I could have never dreamed of as a young child, and to live in a country that something like this could happen. I've been very fortunate and very proud to be here at the National Archives. It's a wonderful feeling. It's almost intimidating, and I don't think an experience in life, these experiences that I got to have because of my friend, and certainly this historical one, life doesn't get much better, and thank you guys for being here too.
Well, I want to thank Tom Nastic for organizing this, and Jeffrey Jackson, who's back there, and he was the wizard with all these wonderful images, and of course Bud and Jerry. This has been a superb evening, and as I said, weren't they wonderful raconteurs?
Thank you.
Yeah, it's crazy that, I mean, you see how many people was there, plus like how many of us have watched it. Because I know some people that have watched this with me haven't seen it before. And yeah, it's amazing that, yeah, how many years later, what they say that was in, I can't remember what year. But, what was I saying? I keep doing this lately. But yeah, all these people this many years later, it must be what, nearly 50, 60 years later now, and people still interested in it. You had all them people there then, and then yeah, nowadays, I mean, I found that fascinating. I found it a fascinating story, and I think that too. That is, well, I don't really know too much about Nixon and his background, but I do know, we've watched things on Elvis, and I also liked his Clint Eastwood line. That shows you that Elvis come up in a real area. When he went to the donut shop and someone said, "Oh yeah, nice jewels." Elvis knew what time it was. He knew. He'd been there. He's from the hood, and that's what I mean. I quite like that because it shows you that that's really having an understanding. Still, as big and as famous as he is, it's having an understanding of where you are. Because there's a lot of celebrities that just think, oh, if you're just nice to people, then it's like, nah. You have to let motherfuckers know that you ain't no pussy in this world. It's just how it is. And Elvis knew that. But yeah, still. Great story. But yeah, that's the reaction. Sweet.